an honor and a privilege to be presenting before you today. I look forward to speaking with each and every one of you and working with all of you to build a strong relationship so that we can protect tribal heritage. Yes, again, my name is Khamal Patterson. I'm a cultural property attorney and researcher. I live in Hyattsville, Maryland, and I am an ambassador and cultural property law analyst for ARTIVE. And today I'll be sharing with you um, a bit about our organization, and I have some slides that I would like to present. So let me just find that. So this session, we'll learn about the art of database for protecting cultural heritage. And it is an honor to be presenting before you during this Native American History Month. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I am standing on the traditional unceded lands of the Susquehannock, Nanticoke, and Piscataway nations who remain stewards of these lands which I am also responsible for maintaining for posterity. So I want to thank the AIAA again for their consideration and encouragement. I'd also like to thank my ARTIVE team for their wonderful support. ARTIVE believes in the power of cooperation and partnerships. We strive to help communities and their culture thrive using database technology in a collaborative and impactful way. The world community just celebrated International Day Against Illicit Trafficking in Cultural Property on November 14th. It is ARTIVE's desire to work hand in hand with the AIAA and tribal nations to celebrate November 14, 2022 as a year full of returns, repatriations, and progress on getting art and antiquities trade stakeholders on board with supporting due diligence for Indigenous and tribal cultural property. Tribal and Indigenous nations live and breathe, and like all people, want to examine and be inspired by Indigenous cultural genius and ingenuity from all periods and cultures. Our mission: we believe in the power of community and hope to join forces with cultural institutions, governmental agencies, collectors, dealers, and insurers on our way to identify, return, protect, and preserve our cultural heritage. Together, we plan to manage the world's most comprehensive and technologically advanced public database. We are a technology nonprofit, a nonprofit organization providing a global, digital, and searchable archive for works of art and cultural property to protect and preserve, to help protect the world's cultural heritage looted and illicitly transferred, stolen, missing, and otherwise claimed. We manage a database. ARTIVE manages the world's most technologically advanced database with integrated image recognition technology and over 500 fields of searchable data. And for our cultural heritage as the human race, as one people, we record and index data for posterity and preservation through the use of technology. ARTIVE's database consists of a team of 20 programmers and designers. It was developed over 15 months, and that led to our highly advanced cultural property database. We are fully secured, SSL protection with all communication to and from the interface, and servers that are fully encrypted. 500 searchable fields of data sets, including individual field searching and Boolean free text search. We have a cloud-based infrastructure. Secure cloud-based data infrastructure allows for data redundancy and allows an online access from anywhere globally. Image recognition and matching. Built-in image recognition technology allows for full scanning and searching of images and documents with pixel matching capability. We offer due diligence services. Registering and searching greatly increase the chance of identification and recovery of claimed objects. It can also protect the original owner's interest in the event of loss or attempted sale and helps prevent the circulation of illicit cultural property on the legitimate art market. Object registration. ARTIVE registers any uniquely identifiable work of art, collectible, or cultural property. You can register items that have been stolen, are subject to a dispute, are on loan or consignment, have been lost or missing, including items looted or forcibly taken during World War II, items that have been illegally exported or excavated, and works subject to a lien or objects that are believed to be fake or forged. We also offer a database search. Due diligence in the art market is a necessary part of any transaction, loan, or acquisition. We work with law enforcement agencies, private collectors, insurance companies, governments, financial and cultural institutions to source extensive loss records and data. And we offer provenance research. Our commitment to due diligence goes beyond the standard check. Together with our international network of research experts, we can help you start investigating and conducting more extensive research into the ownership history, title, or authenticity of a work of art or cultural property. And risk management and environmental impact. International conventions and national trade guidelines have set an important signal for ethical and professional ways of conduct when dealing with works of art and antiquities. The lack of enforced international legislations paired with high value transactions and the speed and ease with which objects change locations and ownership call for due diligence as a part of every risk management process is important. And we want to admonish buyers. We want to admonish them to do title checks. Title checks such as ARTIVE search services and research into the ownership history of a work of art or antiquity are important for the following reasons. It can help prove ownership and the legitimacy of a sale. It can help uncover any potential red flags. It can help determine authenticity. Knowing and uncovering ownership history can increase the value of the object. Following ethical and professional guidelines and due diligence checklists will have a positive impact on reputation. Overall, it creates a safer marketplace and deters crime linked to the art market, such as theft, fakes, and money laundering. Security is paramount at ARTIVE. The security of ARTIVE's database is our top priority. Our engineers are diligent in ensuring the data and accounts are protected. No one else but our team will see your data, account info, or registrations. We understand the anxiety Native communities feel when sensitive tribal heritage data is exposed. It can be a breach of trust and law, especially when the negligent parties are government custodians. For example, while negotiating an extraction lease, the Bureau of Land Management in 2018 mistakenly posted a 77-page report online that included unique identifiers for priceless artifacts as it prepared to auction the most archaeological rich lands ever offered for industrial use. Thankfully, no physical damage was done to exposed sites by looters, but the concerns will remain. ARTIVE, as a private nonprofit, wants to work with tribes, nations, and their representatives to protect sensitive or confidential data and has the capacity to be a reliable and responsive custodian. ARTIVE understands that trust is earned and will listen. So let's get started. What do clients need to create an account? ARTIVE is eager to serve your needs as our client. Please provide us with the following: your name, address, phone number, email address, and a unique account password. After your account has been verified, you may log into your account. Upon logging in, you'll be placed in the Home tab. On the Home tab, you'll see two options: start a new object registration or search request on the ARTIVE database. Starting a new object registration or updating an existing registration is free. Registering any object with ARTIVE is free. After you submit your new registration, you should check the email associated with your account. You will receive an automated notice. This notice signals that a new registration has been submitted. Our wonderful registrar, Kathy, then reviews the registration. If she sees that the registration requires more info or will be better served by revised descriptions, then she will reach out to you as our client. But what information do I need to present if ARTIVE wants to fulfill a search request? The minimum information about an object needed for a report is country of collection, date of acquisition or estimated number of years owned, and type of ownership. If the owner wishes to remain anonymous, then they may use the following designations: private collection, corporate collection, museum state collection, art market, or art trade. Now, the designations listed in the bullet immediately above are not exhaustive. Nevertheless, they are sufficient for categorizing the most common forms of ownership. However, other forms of ownership can be discussed with our registrar and recognized. ARTIVE hopes to identify these through outreach to tribes. ARTIVE also offers paid search requests. A search request takes place within ARTIVE's database and approximately 12 other databases, including Interpol's. A search request includes a copy of the ARTIVE report. The ARTIVE report serves as a detailed, unique, and in-depth record of the due diligence checks performed against ARTIVE's database, as well as other relevant resources, such as law enforcement databases. We value the necessity of a collaborative research approach and therefore conduct additional research against external specialist databases when necessary in order to create thorough reports. The cost of a search request is $395. However, ARTIVE has a membership program with tiered subscription levels to fit the needs of your business, institution, or organization. We are continuously looking to expand on the membership benefits. Please bear with us as we will add more perks this year, which can include museum and event discounts, access to online talks and lectures, VIP access to events, etc. ARTIVE membership levels will include benefits that reduce the cost of search requests and more, as you will see. So, beginning at our friendship tier, just $29 a month, you'll receive the ARTIVE Journal, assisted registration for up to 5 registrations, priority system support, a discount on search services, 1 complimentary ARTIVE report per month, uh, unlimited registration support, unlimited searches, access to partner services, organization team level access, discount with recovery service providers, biannual webcasts or webinars, and tailored staff training. Our next tier is the ARTIVE level. That's $79 per month. And one of the big, or a couple of the big upgrades in this package are assisted registration service for up to 10 registrations and a discount on search services of 5%. After that is our patron level. And again, we have upgraded registration service, among other things. You will receive assisted registration services for up to 20 registrations. You will receive a 10% discount on search services and 1 complimentary ARTIVE report per month, as well as unlimited registration support, unlimited searches, and several other perks that are available in previous tiers. Finally, we have our corporate membership, and if interested, please contact us. You'll receive unlimited assisted registration service, priority system support, all services included at no extra cost, up to unlimited search submissions with the ARTIVE report, accompanying it, unlimited registration support, unlimited searches, and several other perks. And what happens when ARTIVE matches an item a client registered in a search with an item registered on the database? Well, if ARTIVE identifies a similarity between the object submitted by the searcher and a registered object, ARTIVE will take all reasonable steps to confirm whether there is a match, and if so, what the current status of any third-party interest is. In doing this, ARTIVE may need to contact third parties, including law enforcement where appropriate. If an object submitted by the searcher is found to be a match with a registered object and or is subject to any potential interest, claim, dispute, or challenge, ARTIVE will, with permission from law enforcement, contact the searcher to confirm the match and discuss what will happen next. ARTIVE will, with permission from law enforcement, put the searcher in contact with the registrant or their appointed representative. ARTIVE's database, it does incorporate basic machine learning technology in the form of image recognition, and that may assist in making a match or indicating the similarities that require careful attention and examination. This technology is a complementary tool to the personal verification and inspection of registrations and purported matches undertaken by our team. Database matches identified through image recognition are only the start. In many instances, matches in our database are possible because of strong user-powered registrations supplemented by good supporting documentation, such as police reports, condition reports, and ownership histories, or provenance. Records provided by tribes, families, communities, and individuals are key. ARTIVE will be honored to be a place where records pertaining to claims for movable objects may be deposited. These records may capture a wide range of crucial data that may be useful for intangible claims as well. These records may include archival records, treaty drafts, family trees, or other genealogical or kinship records, passages of tribal law concerning right of ownership or possession, inventory records, shipping and transit logs, and bills of lading, bills of sale, photographs, drawing, maps of find spots or territorial boundaries, condition reports, and more can be uploaded to a registration as supporting documentation. We have seen the importance of records to establishing ownership, with the recent legal victory last winter to keep the National Archives in Seattle from being sold, as was the plan during the remaining days of the Trump administration. With government record keeping often in an abysmal state, there surely would have been incalculable losses during the physical transfer, with only 0.001% of the archives being digitized and available online. According to Johnson, Native American tribes have used the archives to win federal recognition, to establish their right to hunt and fish in their traditional lands, and to verify their oral traditions. The government's failure to consult with the tribes before deciding to sell the building violated federal properties. Listening to tribes should be a priority. It will be ARTIVE's. It has been proven that empowering individuals, families, clans, and giving support to their claims is the only way to preserve sovereignty and protect heritage. For smaller, non federally recognized tribes living and working in several states, records are very critical to establishing tribal status and identity in applications for recognition. The benefits of state recognition include those related to cultural tourism. Cultural heritage protections are key to sustainable cultural tourism, such as being able to use the designation Indian made for crafts delineated under the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. The Akahanik tribe was finally recognized via executive order in 2017 after 18 years of fighting for recognition from the state of Maryland. The Akahanik wanted, among other things, to be able to use the IACA to protect their traditional craft and art from appropriation that harms local artisans and the creative economy vital to cultural tourism. Registrations of native art and craft and artist database, especially for works by smaller tribes and nations, is key to protecting the integrity of both the tribal and larger art markets. But why register cultural heritage with ARTIVE? Well, ARTIVE may be helpful for documenting the status or condition of objects and collections in real time before disaster strikes and after. Many Native community museums, galleries, and other cultural institutions may be in remote areas that are subject to extreme conditions that may prevent staff from reaching it easily in an emergency. Fires, floods, and other natural disasters may devastate a cultural space. The Ho Chunk Museum and Cultural Center in Wisconsin suffered a fire in 2020 where more than 500 photographs, thousands of pages of archival documents, baskets, textiles, plus tools and objects made of bone, shell, hide, wood, and glass were affected. Thankfully, none of the objects in the collection suffered irreparable damage. ARTIVE's database may also have value for younger Native artists. Young contemporary Native artists seeking to register their works with the Copyright Office might also see value in ARTIVE's database. For those that are in vulnerable situations, such as those residing with multiple roommates or with less than stable or optimal housing, ARTIVE's database provides a secure place where they can record the location and condition of their works. And Native MFA students in particular often have to deal with people bargaining for low prices for their work or flipping them at auction. This is especially true if they are emerging or early career artists that have not yet found gallery representation. These young Native artists can put information about the pricing of their works in an ARTIVE registration that reflects the true cost of their works, including their DIY, labor, and administration, as well as the names of buyers. We will now discuss how ARTIVE's database could serve tribal aims and interests in protecting cultural property from looting, misappropriation, and trafficking. Again, why register cultural property with ARTIVE? ARTIVE exists to provide reliable information for scholars in the market to perform due diligence. ARTIVE also permits institutions to identify, categorize, and manage collections. ARTIVE seeks to help organizations, institutions, and communities manage risk by providing the opportunity to register cultural goods with information that puts others on notice about the nature and purpose, history, authenticity, and alienability of cultural works. ARTIVE's registration allows for the correction of the narrative surrounding misappropriated cultural objects. Artist registration system provides a lot of search coverage. It uses standard object identifiers compatible with several commercial and governmental databases. And ARTIVE is working on gaining access to databases belonging to foreign cultural heritage enforcement agencies. Now, several of these countries are market destinations for native cultural patrimony, relics, fine art, decorative art, craft, and consumer goods. These markets have both licit and illicit channels, and artists' paid search requests may uncover information on both. Artist registrations gives clients the tools that they need to describe art, artworks, and cultural patrimony in registrations on their own terms. For those who seek an online collections management system or offsite platform for archival data and documents, Artive is a welcoming place. Artive also provides technical support for those conducting paid searches. So, what could an Artive registration look like for an artist in an exhibition? Let's say a curator wants to register some works featured in a large rotating exhibition called Famous Native Artists from the American Southwest. Let's say the curator wants to create registrations to archive an exhibit for works by the revered Navajo artist, weaver, and medicine man Hosteen Claw. The curator wants to do registration of artists by gender. Well, Claw was considered to be intersex. While there is no specific field for gender, the curator could put the gender of the artist in the section of the registration called exhibition history. Identity could be noted within the registration, especially if it's relevant to exhibition or archival categorization. For example, if you're doing archival work on the women artists exhibit in the famous exhibition, Women of Sweetgrass, Cedar, and Sage. A Native artist tribal affiliation or affiliations may be added in the additional notes and details section of the main registration window. Let's say you select collections management as the reason for registration. Well, if you know or believe a Native artist has worked or lived on tribal lands and works attributed to that artist may be found there, you can select other as to the location and add the name of the tribal lands. We're all about correcting and expanding the narrative through material history and personal testimony. Probably the most excellent illustration of this is the story of Native veterans. We recently celebrated Veterans Day. Native veterans have been and are some of our country's most valiant and stalwart defenders. Many nations have higher rates of service than the national average. To them and their families, it is to them we owe our deepest gratitude. However, the story of Native veterans is just now being told. The circulation of on the market of medals of honor earned by Native veterans whose service may not have been published in the wider community is a problem. In the news, a non-Native veteran recently has been reunited with a Purple Heart that he received in Vietnam that had been stolen and missing for over 40 years. Families can register commendations and medals on Artive's website. Placing these personal commendations of service and valor into context is important. Red Jacket, a Seneca contemporary and ally of General Washington, was gifted a commemorative peace medal for his participation in talks that led to the Treaty of Canandaigua in 1794. And the jacket found itself in the possession of Red Jacket's descendant, the great Brevet Brigadier General Ellie Parker, whose service in the Union Army was vital. This peace medal had gone missing for several years and was recently reunited with Red Jacket's descendants. So it shows the full circle, the importance of Native veterans to our nation's history and the importance of identifying and returning these important pieces of personal valor and national history. Again, correcting the narrative requires close consultation to ensure that descriptors are respectful and culturally competent. For example, Pueblo Kachina reliquary vessels are often referred to as Kachina dolls by non-native collectors, enthusiasts, and admirers. But they are vibrant spiritual vessels. Their popularity and circulation has resulted in a diminution of this sacred role that benefits continued commodification and detextualization. Though 2020 was a mixed year for certain types of art, the ArtCod 2021 report claims at the same time the North American and Asian markets confirm their positive momentum. We are starting to see some significant prices. The Morin sale showed a real craze for North American art, and particularly for Kachinas. And this is said by Piera Molafuda, a director of African and Oceanic art at Sotheby's Europe. At ARTIVE, we strive to use registrations to develop a common language to tell the story right. ARTIVE endeavors to provide accurate and reliable information on cultural objects in circulation and their artists when appropriate. One of the best ways to fulfill that desire is working with community stakeholders to develop a common language through which to describe cultural patrimony and artifacts. While the definitions provided by NAGRA to understand how Native culture objects may be broadly defined, we know that they are merely the prologue to deep, layered, and rich stories and interpretations. Respectfully incorporating Native designations, descriptions, and delineations would assist us in developing a common vocabulary that will capture some of the essence of these singular objects. Next, we'll be looking at the types of registration that can be formed in ARTIST database. Now, this list is not exhaustive. We look forward to working with the AIAA, tribes, and families, and we look forward to thinking creatively about how to use our highly customizable database fields to create more effective notice about Native cultural objects in circulation and the history, nature, purpose, affiliation, and attribution of Native cultural heritage. Now, below, you'll find a list of some common types of registration reasons for theft. An object is in dispute, on loan, on consignment, lost or missing, an unlawful excavation, a lien, collection management, a reported fake, a reported forgery, or an unauthorized reproduction. Let's just look at a few types of registrations which can apply to very diverse factual scenarios: theft, in dispute, on loan, lien, unlawful export, and unauthorized reproductions. Theft may be the appropriate designation if the taking of a tribal object was in violation of tribal, state, or federal law. A theft may also be considered to have taken place if it meets the definition of appropriation or confiscation under the Rome Statute, though the United States is not a party to the statute. Federal case law supports the principle that another country's theft statute may be recognized in the United States. For ARTIVE's database, a client who selects theft as a registration designation should include details about the object, such as its last known location, its last known possessor, the circumstances surrounding the theft, and whether the dispossessed client has contacted the authorities. For Native objects alleged to have been stolen from outside the U.S., it could be illuminating to have links to that country's theft law or obligations under cultural property treaties, agreements, or conventions. Also, and most importantly, uploading a copy of any police or investigative report to supplement the theft registration will be very helpful, regardless of the investigating jurisdiction. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can register an object that is in dispute. So you can go to our registrations tab. You'll select the plus sign to create a new registration. You'll select the reason for registration and choose in dispute. You'll hit create, and then you will see type of dispute with three options. Title dispute, which includes the category sale without authority. There's a dispute as to authenticity or other. In dispute designation for a registration may be appropriate for a number of reasons. There is an object of cultural patrimony that no one may own, which has nonetheless ended up on the market. Marking object of cultural patrimony as in dispute and including a detailed and clear admonition as to the cultural property's inalienability puts the market on notice. It also might be helpful to a trafficking claim if the object stays in or is returned to the United States. In dispute sale without authority may be appropriate when there's a genuine dispute over possession and alienation over what otherwise would be considered cultural patrimony. In the case of U.S. v. Coro, the widow of a Navajo religious chanter genuinely believed she could own and had the right to sell her late husband's medicine bundle to the defendant accused of trafficking under NAGPRA. Some tribal experts supported her contention in part by acknowledging her claims of ownership as a widow might be valid, but were disapproving of a sale to an uninitiated outsider that wanted to remove the medicine bundle from the Navajo Nation. In dispute registration may also be appropriate when a nation is located in two sovereign jurisdictions, such as the Tanam Atom in both the U.S. and Mexico. There may be a dispute with one or both governments concerning what country is to be the custodian while cultural affiliation is being determined before repatriation. And if it's permitted and not contrary to tribal law, it might be helpful to provide some excerpts or scholarships on tribal right of possession for certain types of objects. In an in-dispute registration, a client can provide info on when the dispute arose, the location of the object, the party or parties in possession of the object, and any names of other interest holders. Providing this information and any supporting documentation, such as maybe a photograph of the party using, wearing, or in proximity to the item, would be very helpful. On loan as a registration designation. This designation may be most appropriate for objects that are subject of either a formal or informal loan. For example, those with the authority to loan a work to a museum, gallery, school, government office, office building, or cultural institution for a definite term or an infinite one may elect to select on loan. Please provide as much information as prudent about the terms of the loan agreement, whether that agreement was oral or written, information about the loaning institution and their title to the work or right to possession of the work, the purported location of the loan work, and details about the borrowing institution. Now, on loan is distinguishable from consignment, another type of available registration designation that would be more appropriate for works to be sold by a broker or at auction. Another type of registration is a designation is lien. Lien may be an appropriate registration designation if you're aware of or know that the object may be subject to an unsecured or judgment lien against the owner of possession. For example, there may be a judgment lien against a defendant for failing to pay for the conservation of a painting. Painting may be sold to satisfy the judgment lien. Liens are powerful and are red flags that should be noted in a registration, especially if the client has a judgment lien against them and the client is using the ARTIVE database for collection management. Unlawful export as a type of registration designation. Native objects that have been removed without permission or in violation of applicable law may end up in circulation in a foreign market after passing through a custom without objection. The unlawful export registration designation may be inappropriate under certain facts. Nevertheless, an admonition is necessary. Many countries, the US included, do not recognize the export controls of other countries. In light of this reality, unlawful export might not be the most impactful registration designation, except for in the very specific circumstance discussed below. And this is especially true if the U.S. client has reason to know or knows that the object is already in another country. Unlawful export might be a better designation to put customs official on notice that an item is immediately in transit to an airport to be taken on an international flight or is otherwise being prepared to cross national borders. Client can provide information like the flight manifest, the name of the smuggler, illicit exporter, the name and address of the last possessor, the value of the object, country, tribal nation of origin of the object, the medium in which the object was created, and the approximate century of artisanship would be useful in providing a strong registration. Finally, we'll be discussing one final type of object registration, unauthorized reproductions. Unauthorized reproductions affect many types of Native art and cultural heritage. Unauthorized reproductions may impair the value of the works of Native artists and their estates. Now, ARTIVE's database allows for replicas to be registered. However, the art market and Native artisans and designers are better served when there's reliable information about originals. Too often, people equate access to Native design as a license to appropriate based on a mistaken belief that Native designs and articles are a part of the public domain. There was a copyright controversy in 2019 involving a luxury retailer and a Native artist estate. Neiman Marcus manufactured and sold a raven's tail coat based on the copyrighted designs of self-taught Tlingit master weaver Clarissa Rizal that belonged to and were registered by her heirs after Mrs. Rizal passed in 2016. The Sealaska Heritage Institute represented her heirs and sued Neiman for copyright infringement and violation of the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. The party settled for an undisclosed amount in 2021. Artisans like Mrs. Rizal and her family and heirs can use ARTIVE's database to manage both collections of original designs and works featuring those designs. They can provide crucial visual and documentary, including testamentary support for their authorship and ownership. This evidence may be very important if there is a dispute as to ownership or authenticity once works by or inspired by the artisans are in circulation. Artisans, their families, proteges, apprentices, scholars, and authorized licensees can register the genuine work of a Native artist with ARTIVE. They can provide detailed information, including the artist's name, tribal affiliation, location of works, titles of any definitive listing of works, price lists, broker and dealer agreements, licensing agreements, sales contracts, gallery agreements, museum loan agreements, and any indicia of authenticity or ownership, such as versos or hallmarks. These stakeholders should also register any potentially unauthorized reproductions of which they become aware and provide detailed notes as to why they reasonably believe such a piece to be an unauthorized reproduction of a native artist's work. These stakeholders should upload documentation or input detailed notes that support their contention. Now, why register with ARTIVE? Well, ARTIVE supports cultural ownership of works. The power of ARTIVE's database to recognize authorship of cultural and linguistic works complements that of the Copyright Office and public domain, and in some ways exceeds it. For example, take works of grammar, which are critical to supplement efforts to codify and digitize vulnerable languages, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. Many grammars by native custodians and scholars may have been attributed as pseudonymous by non-native interlocutors. Because naming conventions used by native authors' nation may not have been recognized by non-natives, then the native author's name may have been ascribed to a pseudonym. Registration with ARTIVE can help the market be on notice as to whom a work of scholarship by a native scholar should be attributed to. We know that the Copyright Office U.S. copyright has been used to obscure works authored by native linguists. The New Yorker did an article in 2021 that discussed how linguist Frank Siebert embedded himself in the Penobscot community in Maine and over decades learned and transcribed the language as he learned it from the elders beginning in the 1930s. Siebert's efforts were supported by Penobscot community members and other native scholars, but he bequeathed his papers to the American Philosophical Society. Gregory says that in copying down the grammar, the stories, and the vocabulary of the Penobscot, Siebert made them his. And according to copyright law, translations made after 1927 will be entitled to copyright protection. Even translations of native-led linguistic endeavors might be entitled to separate copyright protection as derivative works. The APS became the copyright owner of Siebert's translations of the Penobscot language when Siebert died in 1998. And unfortunately, by the 1990s, the last native speakers of the Penobscot language had died. ARTIVE's database can assist with establishing attribution to a native author. If someone filed a copyright registration on behalf of the original native author or authors, then that work may have been registered as a pseudonymous work. And though an author's native name is not a pseudonym, the appearance of only such a name on a literary, dramatic, scientific, or linguistic work may have been misclassified as pseudonymous. Native works may have been translated by a non-native interlocutor into another language and registered with the Copyright Office without properly naming the original native author. The original work may have been registered with the Copyright Office by someone who failed to name a native author because they believed the name to be a pseudonym. ARTIVE's database would be improved by registrations being updated with the known and suspected names for a native author that is placed into their proper naming convention and context. ARTIVE's database can help native authors and their estates reclaim their name and work. ARTIVE has a relationship with an antiquarian bookseller that maintains a database. So the native authors and translators of important and commercially valuable colonial era works of native linguistics and governance, such as the celebrated pamphlets transcribing Haudenosaunee Confederacy meetings, could be finally identified and attributed. This would open up new avenues of scholarship. ARTIVE's database will be improved by registrations being updated with the names of native authors using proper context and conventions. And also, ARTIVE's database may help to assist with attribution to anonymous native authors. ARTIVE's database could be used to register by what would be considered an anonymous author by the copyright database. And a work is anonymous if the author is not identified in the copies or phono records of his work. If the author's name appears on the work, it is not an anonymous work, even if the author does not wish to reveal his or her identity in the registration record. However, given the reality, many native authors may have been simply left off works that they wrote or to which they otherwise contributed. Individuals, families, and communities can reclaim works of native authors who have been registered as anonymous by the Copyright Office. Their access to personal papers, archives, manuscript drafts, scholarly works, journalistic pieces, political documents, business records, and more can be used to attribute literary, linguistic, dramatic, and other works to Native authors because they possess the evidence needed to corroborate authorship and authenticity. They also may be able to use these documents to establish ownership of books or manuscripts in circulation. Next, we will discuss provenance. ARTIVE registrations may help establish provenance, and detailed information from the public creates stronger registrations. Attribution to a particular native artist is something very helpful for an ARTIVE registration. Nevertheless, a history who owned the painting, even when the work may have been unattributed, is very powerful and is encouraged in a registration. In any registration, particularly for works on paper, identifying and recording conspicuous provenance information is very important for a strong registration. Though provenance information is not always conspicuous, it is okay for a client to put down what information they do have about any solid links in a potential chain of ownership. Registrations may and should be updated as information on ownership becomes available. Information that can be corroborated should be placed in the respective registration fields. Information that is disputed, challenged, or dispelled should be moved into additional notes. And the reasons supporting why previous information is no longer accurate should be supplemented with documentation. Now, we'll take a brief look into an example of provenance info for a painting by 20th century Navajo artist Harrison Begay. So this slide, images were taken from an auction site, and you can see various information about the work that was recorded. And one piece of information that was on the painting itself was information about provenance, saying that property descended in the family of Harry Hines Woodring, 25th governor of Kansas and Secretary of War, 1936 to 1940. This is information that one would want to put in an ARTIVE registration. So next, we'll look for elements to look out for on cultural works that could aid a registration. Some of these are important pieces of information found on visual or sculptural works. For example, versos and hallmarks are a couple of elements that may be found on specific types of works. Versos and hallmarks provide information that may be key to a thorough and accurate registration. Provenance or ownership history of an artwork, even if uncirculated, may be uncovered through the presence of a verso. Moreover, a verso may also be a determinant in assessing authenticity. According to AskArt.com, a verso is the second or backside of any work on paper or canvas. Verso applies to artist sketches or even complete paintings on the reverse side of a work, making it a double-sided painting. Moreover, AskArt says that a verso inscription refers to information on the back of a painting, either on the canvas, the stretcher bars, or on the frame. Provenance expert and friend of ARTIVE, Aubrey Catroni, has done excellent scholarship on versos. She's made her scholarship accessible in the webinar Understanding Versos, When to Flip a Painting Over. Images of versos and verso inscriptions are a critical piece of information both for scholarship and the market. If users can take magnified image to capture information on versos and input information from verso inscriptions into an ARTIVE registration, users would have done a service. If in the event the user registered a piece because they were offered it for sale, then the verso may make the difference if an item in ARTIVE's database is an exact match to the work offered for sale. And if the work offered for sale has a verso inscription different from the one being offered for sale, then the buyer might want to be wary and do further due diligence and research. Now, there were exhibitions of Native artists exhibiting and selling their works at fairs and other events abroad that would have stamps on the verso designating the event. Art and versos become really important during the Cold War era as there was much activity of Native artists and Native art in service of cultural diplomacy. During the Cold War, the Nixon administration attempted to discredit the Native consciousness movement by elevating works about Native peoples. The State Department would host traveling exhibitions abroad of Native art and handicraft in order to create a conversation that the United States was moving toward greater equity for Native peoples generally. In the 1970s and 80s, many Native artists traveled to Europe, particularly Germany, with its long held fascination with and fetishization of Native cultures, to press the cause of American Indian rights. Toss says on their tour of Switzerland, Austria, and West Germany, Runnels and Yellowhair brought the artistic traditions of their people to the Germans to educate them about the difference between Karl May's literary fantasies, other German cliches about Indians, and real creative expression, folkways, and current Native issues and causes. The versos on the works displayed or sold at these fairs and exhibitions should have become a part of the authoritative information on these Native artists' work. Now, versos may be found in catalog raisonnés. Catalog raisonnés are the authoritative, definitive listing of all the known works by a particular artist, often broken down by medium or period of activity. Few artists of color, including very famous Native artists like Harrison McGay and John Quick to See Smith, have catalog raisonnés. Catalog raisonnés make an artist's work more profitable because the artist can rely on rigorous scholarships, relationships with reputable art professionals, and engagement with an artist's family or estate for accurate information on authenticity and provenance. There are limits to the impact of catalog raisonnés in the native art market and trade. For example, for certain types of native art, catalog raisonnés would be difficult to compile, but would still be a worthwhile endeavor to engage in. There may be a market for a category of native art, but without attempts at pinning down artists, works, media, etc., then the opportunity for fakes to dilute the market becomes a very real threat. This threat harms native artists, their families, estates, and the overall market. Journalists Chris O'Connell and Savannah Mayer investigated the problem of fakes affecting ledger art. Ledger art is so named because it was made on cheap ledger paper after the extirpation of buffalo in their traditional range made it more difficult for native peoples to obtain hides used in some types of traditional art. There are some vibrant, genuine examples of ledger art made by native leaders captured by the US government, especially during its successive wars against the nations of the plains. These works have a lot of value on the private market. Their relative rarity has made them a commodity. However, many of these works are forged and sold on internet marketplaces. Genuine pieces of ledger art can convey a great deal of information about tribal life and affiliation, cultural objects, cultural practice before captivity, and the conditions of the captives' confinement that affected the practice of cultural ritual and heritage. Now, I'd like to give one example that may tie together a lot of the things that we've been discussing about provenance and authenticity and versos. Let's say the author of a purported Harrison Begay painting wants to search for an indicia of authenticity before the sale. Well, they may request an image of the verso. Now, according to Ms. Catroni, sellers are often reluctant to provide this information unless they believe the buyer will commit to purchase. Perhaps upon inspection of the work, a prospective buyer can snap a picture of the verso. They can put the picture in any verso inscription in an art of registration. There are places where a buyer could consult to see if the elements of a verso, such as trade show stamps, are genuine. And Ms. Catroni, in her scholarship, has discussed very famous examples of fake versos. So this is an example of this is a Harrison Begay painting, and there's some verso information that says there is handwritten notes are present in sketch. There's a pencil sketch of a horse and a rider on the verso. So this Harrison Begay painting is an example of a double-sided painting where there's this image that you see here, and then there's another image on the back of the painting, all very critical information that would meet lots of criteria to discuss about authenticity, date, provenance, and such. There was another type of element that might be commonly found in certain types of native metal objects, particularly those made of silver, and these are hallmarks. Because ARTIVE's database allows for replicas to be registered, it is critical that we learn from Native communities firsthand about the indicia of authenticity, such as identified hallmarks stamped on to metal objects. There are monographs on hallmarks for Native jewelry and art, particularly pieces made of silver by nations in the Southwest. Nevertheless, without consulting Native artists, their families, their estates, and colleagues, these books are incomplete and cannot provide the reliability needed by the market. Let's look at the example of Navajo master silversmith Thomas Curtis Sr., celebrated both for his exquisite jewelry and his horsemanship. Mr. Curtis had been actively selling artisanal jewelry since 1965. He stated in his early period he sold lighter pieces because of the price of silver and would sell at trading posts and powwows. The stone pieces from this period of Curtis's work was done in the shadow box style. In an interview, Curtis was asked when he began to make the heavy silver pieces for which he is well known. Mr. Curtis says, in the 1960s, I began making heavy silver, and once I did the art shows, the stuff became real popular. As Mr. Curtis' work demonstrates, even the settings for precious gemstones may indicate whether something is a replica of identified jewelry or other objects attributed to an individual artisan, clan, band, tribe, or nation. Proper attribution to each of these communities generates value for posterity, scholarship, and the market. However, for there to be proper attribution, all known indicia of quality, origin, and maker should be available and accessible. Now, we've discussed a bit about some elements to look for that could be helpful for a registration. We talked about how versos and hallmarks contain very useful information. We will now discuss what can be registered in ARTIVE's database and how. So ARTIVE's website provides a non-exhaustive list of commonly registered objects, works of art, antiquities, jewelry and watches, ceramics, furniture, fine vehicles, collectibles, books, and manuscripts, and musical instruments. Now, we'll be discussing two categories of object registrations not explicitly listed on our site, which are replicas and textiles. That's because replicas may be made of almost any object listed on our website, as well as some that are not listed. And many objects considered replicas are not illegal forgeries or unauthorized reproductions, which is good to know. Textiles could fall into the categories of antiquities, fine art, or collectibles. They may even be a part of furniture, such as upholstery, or within a particular piece, such as ceramics. There are certain Navajo pieces of ceramics that may contain horsehair and other textiles. The final category we will discuss will be collectibles. Now, replicas registered in our database may take many forms. For example, replicas may take the form of costume or associated objects used to reenact scenes from Native American history. Toss speaks of Philip Deloria's typology that distinguishes between two groups of hobbyists. Object hobbyists that replicated Indian artifacts as their objects of desire without engaging living Indians, who they consider part of the past and racially other. And then people hobbyists engaged in intercultural contact with live Indians on the powwow circuit and negotiated the differences between Native agency and Euro-American agency. And this typology that Deloria developed is very important and significant for understanding the ways in which replicas may have been created, the context, and then also how they have ended up and are valued on the market. Replicas may also be non-functional objects or objects specifically created for the tourist trade. Replicas may also be inspired by and crafted in traditional media or substantially borrow elements from place-specific native artisanal, artistic, or utilitarian pieces. And replicas may be made by named or unnamed artists. This image here is of a vase inspired by Navajo pottery. It's a Tiffany vase by G. Paulding Farham of Tiffany and Company, and this was displayed at the 1900 uh, Exposition Universelle. This the present vase is based on the design of Navajo pottery. It's raised, has hand raised silver body ornamented with semi precious stones sourced in America, turquoise colored amazonite and bluish opals, as well as hundreds of freshwater pearls embedded in corn cob handles. The vase was also exhibited the following year at the Buffalo Pan American Exhibition. Now, looking at the elements, if we could pick this piece of pottery up, there'd be elements that a client would want to note on the registration. For example, there's a marking on the base that says Tiffany and Company, Paris and Buffalo Exposition touch marks. And then there are elements that you would want to note for provenance in a registration. Tiffany and Company displayed the Exposition Universelle, 1900 Tiffany and Company display at the Buffalo Pan American Exhibition, 1901 sold at Christie's, New York, the 10th of October, 1987, lot 28 from the collection of Gloria and Richard Manny of New York. This is all information about a replica that could be put into an ARTIVE database. Registration. Replicas play a significant role in establishing a taxonomy or continuum of craft or artisanship, as new techniques make volume production more efficient, or motifs are introduced to appeal to tourists, collectors, or even tribes outside of the craftsman's community. There are another type of object registration are textiles. And some collectors of native textiles use them for covers, throws, or upholstery for their furniture and other furnishing. Industrialist Marjorie Meriwether Post had a large inventory collection of native textiles and applied textiles in her Adirondack home at her upstate New York retreat called Camp Topridge. Collectors or owners of furnishings that incorporate native textiles, including those made commercially available by companies like Pendleton, are encouraged to register these furnishings with ARTIVE. They may be examples of thought to be lost, rare, abandoned, or discontinued patterns, designs, or techniques that may provide a wealth of information for buyers, collectors, scholars, and stakeholders in Native communities and outside of Native communities. Textiles are some of our most vibrant examples of collective knowledge sharing and cultural diffusion. Textiles may also bear the imprint of individual vision or innovation or familial technique within the guidelines of traditional artisanship. Textile techniques exist on a continuum, and a taxonomy for them is made possible by registration within ARTIVE's database. Textiles also may be forms of cultural patrimony. Textiles are difficult to conserve, so visual information about their condition is illuminating. Textiles may turn out to be ritually or historically significant, and their utilitarian appearance may belie an important purpose. Resplendent and complex chilkat robes from the Pacific Northwest have been long circulating on the market, where they often fetch a high price. However, Rosita Worrell, executive director of the Silaska Heritage Institute in Alaska, says a chilkat robe is what we call atu, a sacred clan object. She said, our beliefs are that it is imbued with the spirit of not only the craft itself, but also of our ancestors. Worrell says, we use chilkat robes in our ceremonies when we are paying respect to our elders, and also it unites us as a people. Recently, a chilkat robe hanging in a Seattle family home as a showpiece was investigated by the plucky daughter who brought its significance to her skeptical father's attention. After reaching out to scholars in the Seattle area, these experts confirmed the piece was an early 20th century chilkat robe, though they told the father he was not legally obligated to return it. The father and mother, motivated by what they were told, followed up on a suggestion to donate it to the SHI in 2017. The return was commemorated by a 2-hour ceremony attended by the family. SHI's master weaver, Dolores Churchill, marveled at the robe and is eager to study the well-preserved piece. Few weavers of chilkat robes remain. Textiles may also be cultural patrimony of a sacred nature. Probably the most famous example of the critical cultural significance of textiles are the deerskin shirts run by ghost dance co-religions of several nations persecuted by the US government. Most famously, one of these spiritual garments was plundered by a soldier in Custer's army after the massacre at Wounded Knee. It was sold to a Scottish journalist who sold it in 1892 to the Glasgow museum director. And after years of wrangling, the Glasgow City Council agreed to return the shirt in 1998 with handover to the Lakota Sioux at the massacre site in 1999. The Lakota, per their accord with the city, provided a replica of the sacred garment. Now, if you would like to register textiles as cultural patrimony that are in dispute or on loan, there is a way to do so. Culturally or ritually significant textiles can be registered in ARTIVE's database. For items such as Chilkat robes, using the category of in dispute will provide the most coverage in a registration. Detailed notes about whether the Chilkat robe was made for, used in, or was intended to be used in ceremonies would be good for a registration. It would distinguish that piece from Chilkat robes that weavers specifically made to sell on the market. For Chilkat robes that are being transferred between individuals or families in a clan, a client could choose the term on loan when creating a registration in the database. Detailed notes about the clan to which the robe belonged and the right of possession could be illuminated. And registering textiles that were cultural patrimony where the owner was a victim of theft or it could be designated as lost or missing. A spiritual item, such as a ghost dance shirt, because of its utilitarian appearance, could also be registered. If an image of a family member exists wearing one, or the family and the family community no longer possesses it, a registration could be created that uses the category lost or missing because it may have been plundered from the fallen following battle. Uploading a copy of the wearer would be helpful as well. It also might be a good idea to create an alternative registration for such an item using the category theft, because it may have been taken from Native opposition in violation of the Libra codes or other laws governing conduct of U.S. military personnel or militias. We'll also be discussing the object registration category of collectibles. Tuscarora artist and scholar Jolene Rickard delivered a riveting plenary address at the 2020 Textile Society of America Symposium. She discussed her family's history with the raised beadwork tradition of the Tuscarora that spread through cultural diffusion to other nations within the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and was sold in both Mohawk territory and the Adirondacks. Beadwork became an important source of income for Tuscarora women at the Great New York State Fair Indian Village, selling pieces to tourists. Canadian-American photographer George Baker helped document and popularize images of these sales and displays. Pieces of Tuscarora beadwork became important collectibles for which there's a thriving modern market. Such items may be registered as collectibles in ARTIVE's database, and any tribal affiliation associated with the beadwork tradition may be noted along with the name of an individual artisan, family, or clan. And I'd like to do an introduction into supporting documentation. We've talked about types of registrations and reasons for registration, and there might be some surprising ways that we can, and creative ways that supporting documentation can be used in a registration. For example, condition reports help to provide a snapshot into how an object may change or have changed under certain conditions or when it was being moved. Photographs, sketches, and paintings of Native cultural objects and practice can convey a lot of important information that can make for a very impactful registration. Condition reporting may be relevant to claims of damage when traveling. If permitted, uploading photographs or detailed textual descriptions of conditions to our database may be very helpful for insurance or other purposes. There have been very sad incidents where medicine bundles have been opened or damaged during transit. Though this is despite the fact that the TSA provides a Know Your Rights series for Native religious objects. It's unfortunate that TSA members have not gone through and really taken to heart the prescriptions in that literature. ARTIVE allows for you to take documentations or take photographs, or upload descriptions to registrations that document the condition of a sacred artifact or cultural patrimony at each stage of transit or after return to the client's custody. Supporting documentation for registration. The importance of photographs to developing and revealing taxonomies of cultural heritage, as discussed in the work of Dr. Jolene K. Rickard. ARTIVE welcomes clients to register photos containing people wearing cultural objects or interacting with them, even in domestic settings, and including as much information as they have on the people, places, and objects they're in. As Tuscarora scholar Jolene Rickard established in her contributions to the 2002 exhibition on Haudenosaunee beadwork called Across Borders, Beadwork in Iroquois Life, photographs are key to understanding the evolution of culture, heritage, and developing taxonomies of technique, context, and use. Dr. Rickards spoke about the work of photographer George Baker in compiling photographs of Tuscarora in traditional outfits and engaged in Tuscarora women selling beadwork at the brink of the Niagara Falls. Dr. Rickards' work on the importance of photographs of developing taxonomy goes beyond Tuscarora beadwork as commodity or curio. She says Tuscarora beadwork was also an aesthetic practice that was closely linked to Haudenosaunee ongoing construction of knowledge and history, and also part of identity formation. The height of Tuscarora beadwork, according to her and her research, was the 1960s. Dr. Ricker says she's examined different styles and periods of Tuscarora beadwork. After searching museums and archives, Dr. Ricker says she and other scholars are confident that there was a style that they would like to think as Tuscarora beadwork that had white beads and red fibers made of velvet or broadcloth. She also uses photographs to examine the significance of beadwork that depict certain visual elements, such as certain elements in Haudenosaunee beadwork that depict hard borders. She examines a daguerreotype of Caroline Parker, sister of Union officer Ellie Parker, and she has examined the elements present in that dress, looking at certain aspects of the embroidery as symbolic of the consciousness, as peace, that is a part of the peace tree symbology. Also, beadwork on Miss Lady Parker's skirt that depicts the celestial tree, and a symbol that may refer to the roof of the longhouse, the crown of the head, or some world above. All of these elements in the photograph of Miss Parker provide critical information about the taxonomy of very important pieces of cultural heritage. This knowledge is important to scholars, communities, and tribes. It helps to establish or corroborate information pertinent to provenance, authenticity, and more. For other tribes like the Lumbee, this taxonomy of technique, symbology, and style is also very important. A native scholar at American University recently spoke to me about the cultural heritage of Lumbee quilts. After Reconstruction, Maggie Lowry is credited as creating a style of Lumbee quilt based on the longleaf pine native to Mrs. Lowry's part of North Carolina. Mrs. Lowry's work hangs at the Museum of the Southeast American Indian at USC Pembroke, where it inspires new generations of Lumbee quilters. Photos of Mrs. Lowry and other Lumbee quilters and artisans helps us to understand how life inspired art and vice versa, as well as the historic, social, and cultural forces that shape perceptions of Lumbee heritage. Photographs are important for scholars using ARTIVE's database to understand the relationship between art, society, nature, and cultural practice. For example, petroglyphs may depict uses of artifacts or confirm their existence. Petroglyphs may show spiritual or cultural sites and practices in their relation to human or natural history. Last year's awful destruction of Australia's Rio Tinto, and this year with the recent private sale of a cave containing Osage drawings, made it painfully clear that petroglyphs and broader rock art are vulnerable and valued for the wrong reasons. When ethical and in accordance with tribal customs, Native citizens can photograph petroglyphs and register them within ARTIVE's database. Petroglyphs have been removed with the intent to collect or put them into commerce. Back in 2013, 4 petroglyphs were cut from a sacred Paiute site in California. Thanks to tipsters and a reward offer, the petroglyphs were recovered, but no suspects were found to be prosecuted for these heinous acts. Photographs can also be important to establishing a relationship between personal effects, an owner, and a maker. For example, in 1947, Sandra James's parents purchased some dolls, hand-stitched by a child patient at the Albuquerque Indian Tuberculosis Sanatorium. According to Mrs. James, the facial features are all hand-stitched, embroidered on their faces as well, so there's nothing painted or stuck on. the little necklaces move with beads on them. Sandra was wearing a Thunderbird necklace in a picture of her holding the dolls as a girl, and her son in law recreated the original photo. Now, the original photo could be uploaded, and an art of registration could be created for each doll, each of the doll's beadwork accessories, or Sandra's necklace, either in separate registrations or within one registration. You can create a single registration for all of these works by going to the object column in the registration screen and selecting the plus sign to add an object. You could, for example, list the reason for registration as collective management and add notes about the pieces being a part of one's personal collection, or as other and add other notes. It can be said that artwork and photographs may be in dialogue with each other, as well as to any of the objects depicted in either one. This dialogue is important because it demonstrates that cultural objects and practices may have existed in some form, even if not exactly how they may have been fashioned in a painting or a photograph. An example of this is illustrated perfectly in the fantastic 19th century Russian artwork entitled A Boyar Wedding Feast. This lively painting is a somewhat fanciful depiction of the Russian elite social gatherings in the 17th century. The only example of this painting is at the Hillwood Museum in DC, which I highly recommend you visit because there are records and works pertaining to the Yupik and other native peoples. Now, when this piece was gifted to Hillwood's owner, Russian scholars were disappointed yet excited. They wanted to access the painting because it could be examined to learn about 17th century Russian elite nuptials, dress, and foodways. At Hillwood, near the painting, are several objects that can also be found in the painting. The artwork provides context as to how these objects were used and their stylistic integrity, if not authenticity. And there is a dialogue between Native nations and outsiders inherent in non-community replicas that may be found in paintings or illustrations. Toss says that during the 1980s, the ethnographer Peter Boltz reported that German reenactors of the Hunk Papa Lakota would use drawings and paintings by Carl Bodmer as reference and try to reproduce articles depicted there as accurately as possible. Toss says that Boltz claimed that German reenactors' productions are actual replicas consciously made as an effort to bring elements of a past culture back to life. However well-meaning these reenactors were based on diligently studying Bodmer's paintings, cultural reproduction based on Bodmer's works would only replicate the artist's own biases and lack of knowledge. A similar phenomenon has been examined in the work of 19th century English painter Thomas Baines in his depictions of ritual objects in the Congo. Without being a part of the dialogue between families and tribal communities, paintings of objects and events can serve as documentation of the existence of cultural production, but not necessarily cultural practice. Despite this limitation, paintings, like photographs, still have value as supporting documentation. And this is especially true when the client may not be culturally conversant, but is at least aware that an object may have been fashioned by a particular people at a certain point in time. I want to thank you so very much for your engagement. This is just the beginning. We hope that we've provided you with a solid overview of our free registration services and our paid search request services. We hope that we have thoughtfully engaged on how registration with Artist Database may serve the aims of tribes in protecting their cultural property from looting, misappropriation, and trafficking. Finally, we hope we propose some impactful ways that tribes, families, and individuals may use our database on their own terms. It would be an honor to continue this dialogue. We'd like to think that this is the first conversation of many. So I prepared some potential next steps. We'd like to consult with nations about their individual needs and aims for a loss registration, collections, or exhibition management system, or just a digital repository. We'd like to listen and learn about context, attributions, and definitions from nations to create an accurate and reliable vocabulary for registrations. And we would really like to develop a theft alert and notice system with the AIAA and its members. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me and offering ARTIVE this generous space to introduce itself, and we look forward to getting to know you too. Thank you. I welcome any questions. Please enjoy the rest of this amazing conference. I hope that we can chat soon.
Thank you, Khamal.
Thank you.
We have some questions in the chat too, and quite a few, so I'm going to get right into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show them on stage so you can see them. I'm also going to read them.
All right.
This question comes from Alan. Do you actively research auctions and other sales data and artifact collectors magazines for objects to place in your database?
Thank you so very much for that question, Alan. Actually, so at this point, we do not, but that is an initiative that we would like to work on with individuals, with with families, with tribes. Those are all excellent suggestions, kind of data mining for information. And I think that we would like to kind of develop a way of using scholarly publications, trade publications in a way to kind of better inform our system of registration. And if that's something that you are interested in, please, feel free to reach out and email me. I would love to have a conversation. Thank you so much for your question.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm multitasking not very well. Here is the next question. This question comes from Mr. Raymond Andrews. I live in a tourist-based area, gift shops, trader stores. Tags on Native American items have a tag. There's a small print. The tags indicate that those items are Native American assembled. What to do? Any advice?
So that's a real fascinating question. In fact, we had a case a few years ago, one of the first criminal prosecutions under the IACA for essentially large volume trafficking of inauthentic or fake or native objects, or particularly I think it was Navajo jewelry. That is a really good question. You could, I guess, maybe speak to the proprietor and ask from if he can give you a source. Where are these objects coming from? Are there particular artisans or families of artisan that they come from? I think a good sourcing question would be I think appropriate, because it very well could be that these items have been affixed with a tag and they are in no way should not be allowed to have that designation of Indian made, and very well could be in violation of the IACA. So an inquiry would be in order.
Yes, thank you, Khamal. Okay, so let's go to the next question. This question comes from Veronica Passfield. The prospect of finding precious items also brings up concerns about the weaponization of information, even about evildoers. Talk to me about ethics concerns and how you're addressing them. Very good question.
Thank you, Dr. Passfield. I appreciate your question. So ARTIVE takes ethics questions very seriously. And one of the ways that we address ethics concerns and concerns about security is that we keep information from being able to be accessed by someone that's not on our team, or in the case when it's appropriate of law enforcement. The idea that someone's registration information could be used against them, for some if not frivolous purpose, for some punitive purpose, is one that we would definitely like to dispel. I know that there might be objects in our registration that might not be authentic. They might, meet the definition of forged. But, even with that, unless there is someone that has registered an object or because they're attempting to buy that same object, that suspect, we won't, that information won't be dispelled about, distributed out. It's only when there's some criminal nexus, and that's only upon advisement by law enforcement, that we would take that next step to release information about something that could be potentially criminal. But the ethics question is definitely a broad one, and like I said, we're always working to to stay abreast. would love to have a conversation with you about that, but want everyone out there to know that we don't use registrations in a punitive way or information that's gained in a punitive way. We keep the information strictly on a need to know basis within our organization, and only use that for purposes of a potential inquiry about criminal investigation when necessary and under advisement of law enforcement.
Great, thank you. This question is almost a follow-up to Veronica's question. This question is from, is it Shell or Shelly? I can't even remember, but I think it's Shell. Anyway, the question is, so there's unauthorized reproductions. They're being seen in repatriation of Indigenous ancestors by institutions creating actual replicas without consent prior to repatriating to Indigenous communities. Can that be monitored?
That is an excellent question, Shell, and one that registration, we believe, is one of the best kind of it creates this phalanx that we can use against those types of scenarios. Registration of genuine articles and artifacts with a detailed information about provenance, and make and manufacture, those kind of like indicia. I talked about hallmarks, versos, whatever the type of object. There's this kind of spectrum of indicia of authenticity that we would like to know about, so that if something is genuine, we know, or more than likely know, that this is a genuine object, and this other object that someone might be trying to register might be a replica. And it's unfortunate. I'm sorry that some things that have been repatriated have been replicas, and that has been done without the consent of the tribal group. That is that's definitely a failure on many parts of the individual that is that's doing the repatriation. And so ARTIVE would definitely like to work on that situation, to talk to individual nations where repatriations have occurred, and those repatriations have been of unconsented replicas. So again, if you reach out to us, we definitely would like to continue that conversation, because that is a really interesting one. Thinking back to the Lakota Sioux ghost dancer, they returned a replica in exchange for the genuine article that was under an agreement that they had with the Glasgow Museum. So seeing the reverse of that, someone repatriate the replica, is definitely concerning. So thank you for raising that, and that's something that we would like to use our database registration to combat, and would love to work with you on that.
Thank you, Khamal. Actually, Shell has her hand raised, so I'm gonna bring her on. There she is.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi. So actually, I just wanted to clarify. I'm actually talking about human remains.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify, and I'm very, very familiar with the case in Glasgow. The situation that I'm referring to is human remains that are being repatriated, and before they're being repatriated, they're actually taking the physiology and they're creating molds without consent of the, in this case, Native Hawaiians, but also other Indigenous peoples. So that seems, I know you focus on art, but is there any way that you might be able to track that sort of behavior? Because it seems rather, okay, it's unethical. And I think we could all agree on that. So that I just wanted to clarify that for you, and thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, that is a really interesting question. I'm going to have to do some research about that. I could see, because, all the types of objects that can be registered, you could have something like a funerary object, an urn, or something that may contain remains that, ARTIVE would definitely be able to register and monitor, replicas of that may not have the remains in it. But looking at tracking unconsented attempts to make molds of human remains and then returning the molds rather than the actual human remains. That is interesting.
Not necessarily that. What happened was the attempt was made, and fortunately in this particular case was found out prior to, but we don't know if everything was destroyed. But if it was, the idea was to send home the bones and keep facsimiles of them without consent. So basically, and so they are returning the human component, but there's also, I mean, there's a lot to that I don't want to get into too much, but it does seem like that seems to be something that is being done, and there has to be a way to track it because it just is unethical. I mean, surely if we can't make reproductions of art, then we shouldn't be making reproductions of actual human beings. And so I was just wondering, and maybe just to kind of prime your brain so that you would be on the lookout for it in case you see it. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It actually reminds me of, I guess it might be analogous. I read a few years ago about there are death masks in the Peabody of Native leaders, resistance leaders that were captured and forced to make these death masks, and they want to repatriate the death masks. So like this kind of mold of someone's face that they didn't consent to that, but now people feel like they are imbued with that person's spirit, and so they should be returned. And so I definitely mind. I would love to continue this conversation. That is something to be aware of. And even if ARTIVE as an organization wouldn't be the best to deal with, the human remains itself, to, talk about the unconsented kind of making of the mold of human remains, there might be some organizations that we're affiliated with that might be able to kind of work and maybe introduce some legislation. This definitely sounds like an effort that, lobbying could be involved with, because there's so many conventions and things that deal with human remains, even outside international conventions and stuff, even within NAGPRA. So this is what you raising is an important topic. I know ARTIVE could definitely have a role, as an advocate for looking at these issues, and certainly dealing with funerary objects that might have contained human remains that may have been cremated or otherwise, where this person may have been laid to rest in, even tombstones and headstones. But the remains itself, we definitely would want to be working with organizations that can help on this issue. So thank you, Shell. And like I said, my email, reach out to me and we can definitely talk.
Okay, Wado.
Thank you. Thanks, Shell. Well, okay, we are at our time together this evening.